At 2:47 a.m., the bridge of the USS Gravely sits 40 miles south of the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait in the particular quiet of a mid-watch 3 hours before sunrise. Running lights dimmed, the Red Sea flat and dark past the rail. Down in the Combat Information Center, the surface picture looks the way it has for 6 nights running. Fishing traffic hugging the coast, a scatter of merchant transponders blinking their slow, familiar rhythm across the scope. Then, in the space of about 4 seconds, 6 of those transponders go dark at once. It isn't an attack yet. It's smaller than that, and worse for exactly that reason. 6 ordinary contacts near the Yemeni coast switch off the beacons that were telling the Gravely's radar what they were, all in the same instant. Somewhere in that patch of empty water, something is trying very hard not to be counted. 90 seconds later, the Aegis combat system stops looking at 6 blank spots and starts counting a wall. 14 live tracks climb off the coast, spread across 4 bearings, denser than anything this ship has faced in 6 nights of escalation. Down in the surface picture, the SLQ-32 logs a 15th signature skimming the water itself. The tactical action officer doesn't call 3 axes. He calls a number that matters more. 14 contacts, 1 radar, and roughly 90 seconds before the nearest of them crosses into engagement range. Whoever built this wave wants the ship's own classification system, burning time. It doesn't have deciding which of 14 is real and which is empty. Because some of them are empty. Half a mile behind the lead edge of the pack, 4 of the 14 are holding a suspiciously clean formation, flying dead straight, never correcting, never breathing the way a live guidance system does when it fights wind and its own inertia. A real missile wanders a little. These don't. Above deck, nothing has crossed the horizon a lookout could see yet. Below, 11 consoles are already deciding something no lookout ever will. Not whether the wave is real, but which fraction of it is real, and whether the ship can afford to find out the hard way. A security guard watching 14 doors at once, 4 of them propped open on purpose, just to see which one he runs to first. The cell running this launch has watched a war 3,000 miles north for 2 years, and learned its one clean lesson. Send enough cheap airframes wearing the same radar signature as the real thing. And even a warship with a perfect picture eventually spins its expensive interceptors on the wrong half of the wave. It is the same math that gutted an entire air defense ring outside a city that thought itself untouchable. What the cell has no way of knowing is that somebody on the American side watched that exact war just as closely and built the one thing that math cannot survive. Go back. Because this did not begin tonight. For 6 days, Signals Intelligence has tracked a pattern of increasingly bold harassment along the strait, single drones, then pairs, each launch a little larger and a little more layered than the one before it. It is deliberate escalation, but the shape of tonight's package is new. 3 days ago, a cargo manifest surfaced showing radar reflector rigging shipped alongside the usual airframes. The same kind of cheap decoy hardware that spent the better part of the year emptying Russian missile racks over a refinery a continent away. The cell studied that war closely and drew the obvious lesson. Real interceptors are expensive, decoys are not, and any defense that cannot tell them apart eventually runs out of the expensive kind first. The logic is sound as far as it goes. An SM-6 costs millions. A radar reflector bolted to a plywood frame costs almost nothing. And if 4 of them fly close enough to 4 real missiles, a warship forced to shoot at every contact wearing a missile-sized signature burns 4 rounds it didn't need to spend. Do that twice, and the magazine that matters is gone before the wave that matters ever arrives. It is the same arithmetic as flooding a toll booth with cars that never actually pay just to watch the real ones slip through while every gate is still raising and lowering for the fakes. The stakes reach well past one destroyer. Roughly 10% of global trade moves through this strait, and every shipping line still routing tankers past this coastline is watching how tonight goes. A wave built to drain an American destroyer's magazine, proven even once, becomes the template for every launch after it, copied and scaled until it isn't 4 decoys anymore, it's 40. Commander Osei has read the same intelligence and expects exactly this. A mixed wave, real threats hidden inside cheap decoys, built to bleed the ship dry before the real fight even starts. She has run the drill in her head a dozen times this week, weighing exactly how many rounds she's willing to spend chasing a signature that might be nothing. She is right about the shape of the attack. She is one detail behind on why it will not work. That detail is a classification layer quietly added to the Gravely's combat system after the same refinery footage made its way through the fleet, built specifically to answer one question before a single missile leaves the rail. Is this contact actually flying like a weapon, or just wearing one's reflection? The in/spy 6 array doesn't just track 14 contacts, it profiles them. Every return gets measured not once, but continuously. Watching for the small, constant corrections a live guidance system makes fighting crosswind in its own weight. A real missile's track has a kind of nervous texture to it. Tiny adjustments a dozen times a second. The same way a tightrope walker never actually stands still, just corrects constantly fast enough to look steady. A radar reflector toad on a fixed airframe has none of that. It flies too smooth. The flight path is something that has never had to fight for its own balance. For contacts in tonight's wave fly exactly that well. And within 11 seconds of entering track, the system has already tagged them as almost certainly inert before a single interceptor is committed to any of them. That single distinction is the whole game. An SM-6 riding in the Mk-41 vertical launch system only fires once Aegis assigns it a track worth a round. And tonight, 10 of 14 contacts clear that bar instead of 14. The missile itself still does the work everyone expects. Active radar seeker in the terminal phase, closing without further help from the ship, but it only ever gets spin on something that could have hurt the ship in the first place. Underneath that, the evolved Sea Sparrow missile and phalanx hold their usual lanes for anything that closes the last stretch, and Naval Integrated Fire Control Counter-Air keeps every one of those engagements shared across the strike group, instead of resting entirely on one ship's magazine, where a lone air defense battery has to fight whatever crosses its own patch of sky with only its own rounds. INDEFCCA means the Gravely is never actually fighting alone, borrowing a radar track from an aircraft 40 miles out the same way a single cashier can wave a customer to any open register in the store instead of making them wait at one. Overhead, an EA-18G Growler has spent 6 days mapping the single shared data channel every drone in a wave like this depends on for its mid-course update. The same kind of channel that, once jammed, turns a coordinated swarm into 14 contacts, each guessing on their own. The decoys were built to beat a ship that has to guess. Tonight's ship doesn't have to. The wave crosses into range, and the classification layer does its work before anyone in the CIC has to make a call under pressure. For contacts get flagged and ignored. 10 remain live, and even that number is deceptive, because 2 of the 10 are the actual cruise missiles this wave was built around. The other 8 cheap drones meant to look identical on a lesser radar. The first SM-6 leaves the rail against one of the 2 real missiles, closing in under 20 seconds. The second vertical launch cell fires on the other 4 seconds later. The interval Aegis calculated to keep both engagements off the same fire control channel. 2 flashes low on the horizon, and the wave that was supposed to cost the ship 4 expensive rounds on fakes has costed exactly 2 rounds on the only 2 contacts that mattered. Then the Growler's jamming reaches into the shared channel the remaining 8 drones depend on, and the wave loses its choreography mid-flight. 2 drones correct on their own guidance and keep coming. Yes, SM handles the first at range. Phalanx opens up on the second in the last 400 yards, its rate of fire turning 1 leaker into debris while short of the hull. On the water, a pair of explosive boats never reach visual range at all, and MH-60 are putting guided rockets into both within 90 seconds of each other. On shore, the cell watches a feed that should show a ship burning through its magazine on ghosts, and instead shows 4 decoys sailing past untouched, both real missiles gone, and a swarm falling apart mid-flight for no reason its own systems can explain. The plan that was supposed to make the expensive side run dry first has, in the space of 90 seconds, cost the cell everything it launched and cost the ship 2 rounds. Believing the drones are simply delayed, the ground controller pushes a manual override through a backup channel reserved only for emergencies, a channel that has been sitting inside the Growler's collection the entire time. The transmission lasts 11 seconds. It is more than enough. Back in the Gravely CIC, the tactical action officer calls the last splash. The instant Phalanx goes quiet, his voice flat, already moving to the next line. For 1 second, nobody speaks. Then the compartment exhales, watchstanders still at their consoles, because the job in this room was never finished by celebrating a trick that didn't work. By sunrise, the tally is almost insultingly clean. 14 contacts, 2 real missiles down, 6 drones, and 2 boats stopped. For decoys wasted for nothing, 0 impacts. The Gravely spent 2 expensive interceptors tonight, not 4, not 14, because the one trick built to bankrupt its magazine never got the chance to work. State media affiliated with the cell reports a successful strike. No wreckage accompanies the claim, and within hours, open-source shipping trackers confirm the destroyer never left its station. What the cell actually lost is worse than the hardware. The backup override channel, the one reserved for exactly the kind of emergency last night was supposed to be, is now a fully mapped signal tied to a physical location the transmission couldn't help but reveal. 4 decoys and a handful of drones can be rebuilt in weeks. A command channel, once its location is known, cannot be moved without abandoning the infrastructure built around it. The economics tell their own story too. The cell borrowed a tactic that once emptied an entire air defense ring dry over a burning refinery, betting that cheap decoys would beat expensive interceptors the same way twice. Tonight it didn't, not because American missiles are unlimited, but because someone had already watched that refinery footage and built the one layer that makes a decoy look like exactly what it is before it costs anything to find out. Every other cell studying that same war for lessons now has a second data point to weigh against the first. The trick that broke one air defense network in daylight ran straight into a wall it never saw coming, on a ship that had done its homework first. The question nobody on either side says out loud is the one that actually matters next. Not whether this exact trick works against this exact ship, because tonight settles that. It's what the cell tries when it finally builds a decoy good enough to fly with the same nervous imperfection as the real thing. Somewhere below deck, sailors who were asleep an hour ago are already back in their racks. The CIC lights dim to routine, and the radar keeps its patient watch over water that for now is calm again.